Alright, hello friends, welcome to my video today. Welcome to my channel if this is your first time. My name is Tanya. Hi, I like to talk about books, and in today's video, as you can probably guess by the title, I'm sharing my favorite books of 2023. I went through my Goodreads. I think I've read, as I'm filming this, I'm still reading a couple books I think that I'll get done, but as of right now, I've read 80 books, which again, it's not about the number, but that's the kind of the list that I went through. Is through my 80 books, I went through and picked out 5-star reads. So all of these here that I will share today are 5-star reads, just because I read a lot of good books. I have a lot of 4 and 5, but these are like my favorites. And it was really fun to go back and look at my Goodreads and kind of see that list and to really reminisce. I was like, oh yeah, you know, like to really be like, yes, these are my favorites that I have read. So if you're new here, thank you so much for stopping by, and let's get into talking about these books. And also I want to wish you guys Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I know it's almost Christmas. I'm so excited. I can't wait to celebrate with family and be home and just celebrate with my kids, and I'm just so excited. I love Christmas, and I hope that, you know, I'm wishing you all an amazing holiday as well, and Happy New Year, because I'm not sure. I'm going to try to upload maybe another video, but I'm not sure if I will be able to by the new year. I'm hoping to do a video about my least favorite or worst books of 2023, so we'll see if I get to that as well. But let's get into my favorites. I'm so excited. And I don't have these in any particular order. It's just kind of like I just went through Goodreads and grabbed them and then pulled them off my shelf. Most of these I have in print, a couple I don't. Let's just start, I guess, with the most recent, maybe, just because it's right here and I have read it recently. It is The Ballad of Never After, and this is the second book in the, oh my gosh, the Broken Heart series. What is, oh, I can't think of things. It's like one of my favorite series of the years, but I can't think of the name. But this is particularly the second one in the series, and I really enjoyed the whole series overall. I might, if I can, do another video talking about my favorite series of 2023, because I read some good ones or started some good ones. But the second one, there was just something about this one. I had a perfect combination of just tension and like suspense, and if you don't know about this, I know this is a pretty popular series, but it's a fantasy romance, I would say, but it's a young adult. But I just really like the second one because it continues, again, I don't want to give a lot away, but it continues the story that started in the first book, and the first book really kind of, you know, ended on a cliffhanger, so I really wanted to get into the second one, and I flew through this one. I could not stop reading. I read this in less than 24 hours. It just was a perfect combination, and I just really, really loved it. And but it was my favorite out of the 3 books, because obviously I just wanted to do my 5-star, so this was definitely a 5-star read for me. It was just so good, and I just think it was done really well. This is one of my first books read by Stephanie Garber, and I'm so excited to try other things. I know she's also written the Caraval series, so it's on my list to read that this upcoming year, because this was just so good, and the rest of that series as well, that I can't wait to try out something else. But this is one of my best reads of the year. The next is part of a series. I'm currently on book 3, but this is the it's The Boys, again, I never know how to say it, I should learn, but The Boys of Tommen, I don't know, but it's Binding 13 and Keeping 13. Both of these were 5-star reads for me. I'm currently reading the 3rd book, which is Saving 6, and I have the 4th one as well. Loving those as well. This series, I don't even really know how to explain. I was telling my husband about this because it's not really anything crazy. So this is, I would say, if you are a fan of Magnolia Parks, you would maybe like these. It takes place in Ireland, and it's kind of like a high school romance essentially, but there's just so much more to these books. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's just how Chloe Walsh writes them, and they do have definitely look up trigger warnings. There's really intense topics discussed in these, and it follows kind of a group. It's kind of like a family, but also the friends of that family group, and there's different couples throughout the friendship group, and these 2 books focus on Shannon and Johnny. They're the one couple, and it's just, they're so good. There's something about them where it's just talking about life essentially, you know, there's not anything crazy. They're not you know, there's no superpowers, there's no anything really like epic, but yet just how they are written and how they talk about life. And even though like at first I was like, oh, high school romance, like that really wasn't, but like reading about it, it was so good. I don't really know how else to describe it. I say give it a try, and especially like I said, if you've liked Magnolia Parks, I feel like you really would like these, but these were just so good. They were just a lot more than romance. It's really like coming of age, just about life, hardships, and it's just really good. And I just love these so much, and I feel like I would read anything that Chloe Walsh would write. Like, I'm really excited to try any of her other books, backlist, because this is the first things that I've read by her, but I'm so excited. Like I said, I'm already reading the third one. I'm almost done. So good, and I'm just so excited. I don't want the series to end because it's just so good, and I just loved that I discovered these this year, and I'm just so happy about them. And the next two books, I will insert pictures on the screen because these are on Kindle Unlimited, so if you have KU, definitely check it out. It is the Crown series, I believe it's called, but my favorite two are particularly the first two books, which is the North Queen and what is it? Oh, Shadow Queen. So North Queen and Shadow Queen, those two are my favorite. The third one was also really good, but it was a 4-star. So again, not terrible, but again, I only picked 5-star reads for this video. The first two were so good. It is a fantasy romance, and it follows, again, you can kind of see some of my recaps if you see my other videos from monthly wrap-ups. I talked a lot more about it, but it's just so good. It's written really well. The plot and it's a perfect balance between the romance and the plot. It's not overdone where it's just like only romance heavy. I like to have a combination of both, and it was done really well. The magical elements, it wasn't too high fantasy, which I prefer, and it was just done really well, and it just kept me hooked. And again, I think they're pretty big books. I think they were like 600 pages, 500, and I flew through them. They were just so good. There was just like really cool character development, and a lot of the characters I fell in love with, and it was really great to follow through all 3 books of the trilogy. And like I said, there's like the romance, the trope was balanced really well with the action and the political intrigue and the fantasy elements of like court life, and it's so good. I don't want to give too much away, but if any of those things kind of sound interesting to you, I would recommend it. It was a really great fantasy. I kind of just happened to come across it, and I'm so glad I did. It was one of my favorite series of the year, but like I said, particularly the first and second book was really good. I loved it. And this next one, oh good lord, I just love this book so much, but it is The Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros. And this book, oh, like, I sometimes am emotional, but it takes kind of a lot for me to cry from a book. But the tears that I shed when I read this book, and it was like good tears, I don't know how to explain it. And the last thing that I could kind of compare this to was when I read Nightingale, like years and years ago, by Kristen Hanna. If you are someone who loves historical fiction and romance, which are kind of my favorite genres, fantasy is becoming one of my fast favorites, but I am like my OG genre of choice was historical fiction and romance. And if you love any of those things, please read this book. It was just so good, and it even had like little twists that I thought I figured it out, and I was like, I'm still gonna love it, but there's these little twists, and I don't want to give any of it away. But it takes place, it's dual timelines, and it takes place during World War II and then like current modern time. And I love it because it has a lot of things I love, like I said, like historical fiction, romance, but it also has letters, and it's so good. It's written beautifully. There's little plot twists and things, and just the love story is beautiful. And I just think having that added element of having it based on history and just it's just so good. And I especially love the historical subplot, the plot timeline. The modern one was good as well, but because it kind of overlapped and connected to the story, it's so good. And I have recommended it to so many people, or like purchased it for other people as gifts. I just really, really like it. And I still think about this book so many times, and I want to talk about it to others. I'm like, have you read this? Because I want to talk about it. It was so good, and I loved it. Definitely a 5-star read for me, and one of my favorites, I think, of like all time, if I may say that, because it was just so good. And the next one, I don't have this one yet, but I'm hoping to get it for Christmas, is on my Christmas list, is Divine Rivals. I have purchased this, like I said, if it's a really good book, I purchased it for other people because I love this one. This was something I was new for me from this author. I had never read anything by her. Definitely want to try out other reads by her, but it was so good, and I know it became pretty popular, and I feel like with due reason. It was so good, and it's a young adult romance, but I wouldn't say, I mean, it is a romance, but I like it again because it's one of those books that balances, if you notice, you'll see a pattern. I love historical romances and kind of like slight elements of fantasy, and that had all those things. It was just so good. It takes place, it's weird because it's kind of like a fantasy element because there's gods who are at war, but the kind of the setting is more historical. Because I don't know, it's so good, and there's a little element of magic because there's like magical typewriters, but it just follows the story of these, it's kind of like I wouldn't say maybe enemies, but maybe like workplace competitors sort of thing, and it follows their life because they're competing for a position at work, but yet they are corresponding, and it has letters. I love things with letters, but they're corresponding through letters, and they don't realize that they're writing to each other. And it's just, again, there's little elements of like fantasy, but it's not super high fantasy, which I think makes it easier to follow even if you are not a normal fantasy reader. Like if you're kind of thinking about getting this book or trying it out, if you're not even an avid fantasy reader or like super in-depth, I think you would still really like this book. And it was just wonderful, and I'm so excited. I've already pre-ordered the second book in the duology. It comes out later, like a couple days after Christmas, I think, and I'm so excited to dive back into that world. But I just loved it. It was beautifully written, just the story of it, and again, it was so good. And I just, something about the language and how it was written, I just loved it, and it really just, it made my heart and soul happy, and I'm so excited to read the next book. And let's see here, we'll dive into this bad boy. Unlike the sequel, which we're not going to talk about in this video, I loved this book. I just loved this story. This was the first Rebecca Yarros that kind of got me into her world of books, but I love this first book so much. I just loved, again, the elements of like romanticy, romance, and fantasy, and it was just written really well. I felt like I could follow it even though it was a fantasy, you know, like world, but it wasn't too crazy high fantasy for me. And I love the dragons. The dragons is what make it for me. I love their attitude, their spice, their sass. If you've watched any of my other wrap-up videos, you know, like, the dragons is what does it for me. I'm not even so much obsessed about, like, you know, like the other characters and like Violet and not everybody else, like, and Xaden, like, yes, but I'm not really obsessed with Xaden. I'm more obsessed with the dragons. Like, they're just so, I just love them so much. And this was just such a fun read, and I love this. It was so good, and so many other of my friends have read this and loved it as well, and I liked it. It was just such a fun read. Like, I think if you are curious, like I said, it's a pretty easy fantasy to follow. It's not as gigantic as maybe some fantasy books. I know obviously this is obviously part of a series, but it's really good, and I really love this one. And it's still, I think about it and the characters I was introduced to, like I said, the dragons, I just love them so much. I love them. So this was a really good read for me. And the next one that I wanted to talk about was Magnolia Parks, in particular the third book. It's just, I don't even know, because I tell my husband, and I was telling my friend about this too, I was like, it's really weird because if I describe this to people, it kind of, people at first are like, what, that kind of sounds stupid, but it's like rich millionaire and billionaire, like, young adults, and basically they just do stupid stuff that I would never do. I don't really have any connection to their lifestyles. I am not a rich millionaire, you know, like, I don't have a private jet. I don't lead the crazy life that the characters in here do, but there's just something about the way that Jessa Hastings writes this and the way it's written. And also what I loved about the third book is, if you read the first one and when you're reading and you're like, these people are toxic, these people are insane. Yes, I agree with you. But I also recommend if you read the first one and you're not sure and you're like, this is insane, why are they acting this way, they're dumb. When you read the third one, I feel like there's so much more of a connection that explains so much more of, you just get that connection. It kind of comes full circle. The endings are also cliffhangers, and it just messes with you. And like I said, these are pretty, I mean, these are pretty hefty. What are they, like over 500 pages? But it doesn't feel that way, especially if you're reading them on Kindle too. But it's just, it's so good. and I just can't wait. The next book in the series comes out earlier in the year. And I also just love the original covers. They're beautiful. And I just love getting to know the characters because they develop throughout each series. And I just find myself rooting for them, even though they're so crazy and obnoxious in some ways. So, but I love this so much, and I recommend trying it out. I know it's not for everybody, but I really, really love this series so much. And the next two books that I have left, this is actually a middle grade, and this is called Song for a Whale, and I really, really like this one book. It was just so good. I really liked it. It follows the story of a girl. What is her name? I've already forgotten the name though. Oh, Iris. And she is deaf, and so she finds out about this whale who is also, apparently he is not hearing, like he's not able to communicate on the same like wavelength or the sonic level of like other whales when they communicate, like by sonar. And so she finds out about this whale, and she kind of builds a connection to him, but because she's like, he's kind of similar to me, where her living in a hearing world and going to like a hearing school, she's just really struggling. And I think it was just a really good way, because again, it's a middle grade book, so it was pretty easy to get into, but it was really interesting to read because you find out more about just, I think, about the deaf community and about her as a deaf person. And it was just really cool how they made the connection to her and the whale. And what I really liked about this and found that it was done really well, a lot of the things, because I annotated in here, were actually from the chapters that were from the point of view of the whale. And I just thought they like really touched my heart. Like it was so good. And I just think this is also like, if you don't know maybe what to gift, like maybe a middle school or even a high school, or anybody really, but it's just such a good and easy read. But I really enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend it to everybody. It's just, it's a good one, and I feel like it tackles, you know, kind of maybe something that could be difficult topics, or maybe something that may not be known to everybody, but it does it in a really interesting way. And I feel like that's very common for young adults. This one is really great, and again, it was just a fun read, and I just love that we got to read from the point of view of a whale. And like, I don't know, it was just a really good book, so I really enjoyed it and definitely recommend this read to everybody. Then the last book, but not last but not least, right, is this book right here, A Court of Mist and Fury. And I particularly picked this one because this one was my favorite out of the whole series, because to be honest, I am not like an ACOTAR diehard fan. I know a lot of my friends are, and it's not that I hate the series, but I will say that I've read a lot of other fantasy besides the ACOTAR series, and you know, from Sarah J Maas, and I feel like those authors who, in a lot of ways, I prefer more than to her writing, to be honest. But this book I loved. It really sucked me in. It really made me fall in love with the characters, and just the romance, the fantasy was a perfect balance. It was one of those books where I was sucked into it and did not feel at all like it was a 600+ page book. You know, it was just one of those, like, you guys get it if it's like you love it, you don't care. It could be a million pages and you're like, it doesn't feel like it. And I just loved it. I felt like the character development was so good, and unfortunately the rest of the series I don't feel that way about, but I did love this one. And when I think of ACOTAR, my world and my mind just lives in here. This is the book that I want. I don't really care so much about the other books, like I said, to be honest, but this is where my mind lives. It's just right here. I love this one. It was just so good, and I wish that I could erase it and reread it again. This one was a fun one for me. It's definitely my favorite out of the series, so I really like it, and it was just so good. So there you have it. Those were my 5-star reads of 2023. I hope you guys enjoyed them. For sure, comment down below what were some of your 5-star reads for the year, because I definitely want to check them out and add them to my ever-growing TBR list. And I'd love to hear from you guys. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.